Nicole Winans. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. First of all, I would like to let you know that this meeting will be recorded, and the recording is starting now. So we have a good amount of attendees, so I think we can go ahead. Hopefully a few more will join during the presentation. And I would like to introduce you to my co-host for tonight. Huda Ali is with Vdot, who is the primary department that is maintaining the road in Fairfax County. So Huda is going to talk about the actual paving aspect tonight, the logistics of how roads are being chosen for repaving every year. And then after that, we will talk about the proposed restriping of a part of Telegraph Road, which is done in partnership between Vdot and the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. So we have to meet virtually still because of the pandemic, and it's a little bit different than how a in-person meeting would be conducted. So I just wanted to let you know that you can ask questions at the end. If you would like to place those questions into the chat or the Q&A while the presentation is going on, feel free to do so, and then we can read the questions at the end and answer questions. There will also be the opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting. And we will have a slide that shows the instructions. If you're on the phone, you can press *3 to raise your hand, for example. Or if you're attending on your computer, there's a raise your hand button on the lower right of your screen, and you can let us know that you have a question, and then we can unmute you. And let's see if we have the supervisor's office here. I don't think so. So this is for the lead district, a meeting that was specifically requested by Supervisor Lusk as an outcome of the district-wide paving and restriping meeting we held this spring. So this is why we're meeting this summer. Usually we have these type of meetings in the spring. Paving is already ongoing all over the county. But this was a road that was at the last minute requested for changes to the striping to improve safety. You may be aware that there was a bicycle fatality just recently on the road. So there's a community interest in improving safety as much as we can. This is an opportunity. The road is being striped anyway to change some of that striping. All right, so I would like to hand it over to Huda Ali, who's going to talk about the paving aspects of why is this road being paved, and maybe if you're living close by, why your road is maybe not on the paving list. So Huda will go into detail about that.
Thank you, Nicole, and good evening, everyone. My name is Huda Ali. I'm the Assistant Director for Transportation and Land Use at Vdot for Southern Fairfax County and Arlington County, and I'm going to be presenting our paving program tonight. So let's get started. So we can go to the next slide, Nicole. All right, so our agenda tonight includes basically discussion of our paving program for Northern Virginia in general. We will talk about the budget, how we plan and construct, and then we're gonna talk in a little more details about how we select roads for paving and how are the ratings are determined, and then we will talk about paving treatments, pavement dashboard, which we use to track our performance, and then we will discuss also the pavement marking and striping as part of the program, And we also, for this part of it, we work closely with Fairfax County DOT team to try to incorporate and accomplish some goals in enhancing the bikes route networks and some other pedestrian improvement, or specifically for safety. So we can go to the next slide, please. So the paving program in Northern Virginia is the largest in the state. We basically maintain about more than 14,000 lane miles. To put that in perspective, that's pretty much equivalent to going back and forth to San Francisco twice. It's even more than that. As you can see from the figures, Fairfax County account for more than half of that mileage we maintain in Northern Virginia. So the program is pretty large. Next slide. So in our budget slide, so the budget allocation is in millions. As you can see, this year we have 108 million allocated. That's slightly larger than what we allocated last year. This to cover all three major categories of roadways, to include interstate, which is roads like I-66 and I-495, primaries like Route 50 and Route 7, and then secondary, which constitute the big bulk of the roads that we spend the budget on. Secondary range anywhere from a subdivision street to a secondary road, a major one like Telegraph Road. As you can see, since we start tracking this program in 2013, the budget pretty much doubled over the years. And there were actually a couple of years in between where there were larger allocation to try to bring the state, especially secondary streets, to the performance goals. Next slide, please. Next, please.
1 second, Huda, I'm troubleshooting some sound problems. I can't hear you.
Oh.
Well, you're very, very, very quiet. 1 moment.
Okay.
I'll move to the next slide and keep working.
All right, so our next slide, we will be discussing planning and construction. So we're pretty much in the construction season for 2021. It starts in April and concludes in October, covers basically the month of good weather. And then the planning for next year pretty much starts in early spring, goes through summer where we do the data gathering, and then by end of the summer into the fall, we do the analysis and we prepare the schedules. We coordinate with central office and so many other entities. We also, by winter, we will be ready to award contracts, and that's when we advertise for bids. And then when bids are received and reviewed, then the contracts are awarded and executed. So this pretty much should be done by end of the year. Next slide, please. So how are the roads are selected for paving? So we do really spend good amount of time and processing in try to select roads for paving, mainly because the demand is large and then the funds are really limited. So we factor many things in our decision, that to include pavement condition, traffic volumes, paving an entire neighborhood versus just main streets, avoiding locations with existing projects and or utility projects, which pretty much coordination with all the projects that we know of. And then, of course, economies of scale and mobilization costs are also are taken into consideration. We also take good feedback from our maintenance crews who are most familiar with the roads and the current conditions. And so we also look into their recommendations and requests. Next, please. So when we talk about like data collection, we use vans similar to this one. These vans are equipped with GPS equipment and cameras underneath and on the side to collect the current pavement conditions in terms of pavement stress, roughness, texture, rotting, and it's all digital in digital format. And then once the data is collected, our specialized team get to analyze the data and determine the next step, which we can see in the next slide. So once the data is analyzed, every road receives a pavement rating. So the rating is based on critical condition index, CCI. Critical condition index was first used by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we then adopted it because we thought it was very efficient. It's basically the scale goes from a 0 to 100. 100 is excellent, 0 being extremely poor or no score. So the goal for each road is to receive a sufficiency rating, which is pretty much equal to 60 or above. Any rating below 60 is in consideration for the paving schedule for the year. To the right, you can see examples of with photos of road ratings. So it goes anywhere from the top one represents an excellent rating from 90 to 100. The next one is a poor rating, pretty much 50 to 59. And then the bottom is a very poor rating. And as you can see, we pave both asphalt and concrete. However, concrete is not very common. And if you notice the color coding on the left, this will later be displayed on a map that we will show later in the slides. And basically, this is the same color coding used here. Next, please. So when we do the data collection, we pretty much the frequency for data collection in terms of using these vans. For interstate, we do that annually. And then for primary roads, we also do annually. For secondary roads, because the network is pretty large, so we do 20% each year, and we complete the cycle every 5 years. Also, beginning of this year, we added a subcategory to the secondary roads, basically roads with higher average daily traffic, higher than 3,500. For example, like Braddock Road, we start treating them similar to primary roads, which means we are rating them annually starting this year. Next, please. So traffic volumes are also a big factor in determining our rating and our goals. So the goal for interstate primaries and secondary routes with high volume, like Braddock, our goal is 80%, to achieve 80% of the roads with a CCI score of 60 or greater. And for low volume primaries, which is less than 3,500, the goal is 75%. And then for low volume secondary, which is pretty much subdivision streets all the way to a road similar to Telegraph Road, the goal is 60% for a CCI of 60. Next slide, please. So the pavement dashboard is what we use to track our performance. As you can see from the graph, for interstate, by last year, we're pretty much at or above our sufficiency goal. For primaries, we achieve similar results. Secondaries, we've been working hard on those since we started the tracking in 2013. A lot of funds were allocated, and by last year we were almost at our sufficiency goal of 60. So we're just 1 point below at this point. We're hoping to get our goal by the end of this year. Next, please. So there are different types of pavement treatment. So there is preventive maintenance, is pretty much crack sealing and patching. It's not very common, or it's not even very efficient, so we don't do a lot of that. However, our focus is more on corrective maintenance, where we use plant mix, which include milling the top 2-inch and then overlay 2-inch of surface mix asphalt, and in combination with patching as needed. This is the most common treatment that we do for our roads. And then there is the third treatment, which is restorative maintenance, where the milling goes a little deeper to intermediate layer. It goes from 2 to 4 inches, and then milling, and then it gets overlaid with 2-inch of intermediate and another 2-inch on top of surface mix asphalt. And then there is full depth reclamation. This is very rare, and it includes basically excavating the whole pavement and rebuilding of the subbase, basically for additional pavement stabilization. And then in addition to that, there will be 2 to 4 inch of intermediate and surface asphalt mix. It's pretty expensive, and we applied only on roads that are in a very, very bad shape. Next slide, please. So we do have online resources that's available for public viewing on virginiaroads.org. So there are a couple of mapping resources available. One of them is the pavement condition map. It's where the data that get collected, it get displayed on this map. So if you go to this map, you can pretty much enter an address and be able to see the pavement condition rating for your street. And you can see to the right, there is the color coding that we saw earlier on the rating slide. Next, please. So, and then the other map that we have is the pavement status map. And the 2021 pavement status map is already posted online because paving is in progress. And the way you could use this, again, similarly, you could enter an address and then zoom in. If you right click on the street or the address, you will be able to see information related to the project, including the project manager information and contact numbers, email address, the name of the street, information on the schedule, and so many other details. Also to the right, you can see the legend for the map as well. Next, please. So we also, part of the paving, we do marking and striping. So those goes in 3 categories. There is the typical pavement marking under the contract, which covers replacement in kind, basically putting back what was originally in. However, in some occasions, we may add minor improvements like adjusting a crosswalk or adding an edge line or something minor of that nature. The second type of changes we may make in terms of striping could include like improving safety or operational, or incorporating safety and operational needs. That will include like lengthening a turn lane or even creating a new turn lane, depending on the need for that location. And lastly, we do coordinate with Fairfax County DOT to seek opportunities where pavement markings could be changed during the repaving operation to enhance the on-road bike route networks. So that could be done in terms of shared lanes or creating standard bike lanes or buffered bike lanes, and also to coordinate on planned pedestrian safety improvements, like, adding new crosswalks. And the county team will be talking in more details on that subject. Next, please. So so these are basically contact information where the citizen can report a problem or complaint. Doesn't have to be just for pavement. It could be for any other issues or need. Also, there is the pavement condition map, and the status map could be both located at the web addresses here, virginiaroads.org. You can search by web maps. And I thank you. I think this concludes our presentation for tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Huda. Let me switch to my screen now.
Thank you, Nicole.
So, Nicole, you should be able to present now.
Yeah, it still says that your copy is open.
Sorry?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. WebEx wouldn't let go of the PowerPoint.
There we go. All right, so now that we have covered a little bit of how we got here in the first place, Vdot's paving program, giving us the opportunity to revisit the current striping on Telegraph Road. So I will cover some of the thoughts behind some of the recommendations we have for the stretch of road. But to take a step back, the county and Vdot are coordinating through this paving program to primarily implement the county's comprehensive plan. So we screen all the roads for potential striping changes that are recommended in our comprehensive plan, but also additional safety improvements outside of the plan or the planned network. And the reason for that is because we have a blank slate to start with, so we have some flexibility in how the stripes go back. If we would do that as a capital project, as a county, it would cost a significant amount of money because we would actually need to repave the road ourselves in order to even change the striping without major damage to the existing pavement. So doing it through this process comes nearly at no cost. It's a very insignificant cost in comparison. So it's a good opportunity to make sure that the striping is as safe as it can be. And who are we doing this for? So one may think, okay, maybe I'm not feeling comfortable riding on Telegraph Road. You're probably either in the blue category here, the interested but concerned, or the no way, no how, which is the red category. Like I would not even consider riding a bike at all. But there are cyclists that are quite comfortable on roads like Telegraph, which we call the strong and fearless. It's a small segment of the population, but it is out there. And if a bike lane is there and it's fairly connected, or they'll just have to go down a couple blocks on the bike lane, and enthusiastic and confident cyclists, which is about 9% of the population, would still use that bike lane. So it's not ideal. It doesn't serve everyone, but it does serve bicyclists that are currently using the road already, or are interested in a safer way of using the road and would be okay riding on the road next to traffic. So for other cyclists that need a little bit more protection, a little bit more cautious, that's what we do capital projects for. So we would build a shared use path or separated bike lanes, but those come at a pretty significant cost, about 10 million per mile currently. So that's something that's more of a long-term vision for Telegraph. So just quickly, what type of bicycle facilities we have the ability to implement through repaving. On the left here, you see a shared lane marking, which is something we would actually implement usually in a scenario where the road is not wide enough for 2 bike lanes, just like Telegraph. However, we like to see those share lane markings on lower speed roads. So Telegraph is a little bit too fast to implement shared lane markings. However, the bicyclist can still ride in the road the opposite direction from the bike lane. So currently we only have a bike lane in one direction. On the other side would be a shoulder that may be too narrow for some cyclists to feel comfortable riding in, and they can take the full lane per Virginia law. So again, we won't use the shared lane markings here, but that's pretty much what they are for, to kind of show that cyclists are expected in a road on roads that are too narrow for a bike lane. Then the standard bike lane is here in the middle. That's pretty much what we're proposing, northbound. And then if we had a little bit more space on a road like Telegraph, we would love to have a buffered bike lane for some additional comfort, but that particular stretch of Telegraph is not wide enough to let us implement that. What are the benefits of bicycle infrastructure? Yeah, of course, they serve cyclists, but there are other benefits as well. For example, they benefit pedestrians. So pedestrians that are trying to cross the street now have safer crossings because the cars that are driving along the road are now closer to the center of the road, which reduces the space where a pedestrian is exposed to the cars. So it helps with crossing, makes it slightly more comfortable. And also walking along Telegraph. So there is intermittent pieces of sidewalk. Some of the sidewalk is pretty close to the road. So having a bike lane there pushes the cars away, again, towards the center, away from the sidewalk, and there's now a buffer and makes it a lot more comfortable walking along Telegraph. It can help reduce speeding, so narrowing the road visually a little bit, tells drivers to slow down a little bit. It doesn't make a huge difference for most drivers. They probably wouldn't even notice the difference, but for high-end speeders, like the top speeders, it does make a difference and makes it it's like a visual cue to slow down a little bit, and that can help reduce noise levels as well. And you do have some driveways along the stretch of Telegraph. If you have a bike lane in front of your driveway, it will help improve your sight distance. You don't have parked cars here, but the sight distance is still improved looking left and right for cars, because again, the cars are pushed away from the curb a little bit. That helps increase visibility for people trying to get out of the driveways. So here's an example of this traffic calming effect that I mentioned. This is Annandale Road. You can see how it looked before on the left. And just by narrowing the travel lanes to a standard travel lane. So on the left, it's excessively wide, which can lead to speeding because drivers have a lot of room for error and just, may not need to pay close attention. The road on the right, it doesn't have any impact on traffic flow, but it looks a little bit more narrow and makes it, drivers have to pay more attention to make sure that they stay between the lines, and it helps slow down the top end speeders. So the part of Telegraph Road that we're talking about is shown here. So you can see that it's a pretty long stretch, but it's not the entire road. So it's between Mission Court and Florence Lane, and this is what it looks like on the right here. So you can see the sidewalk here on one side. no sidewalk on the other side in most areas along this stretch. There are 2 travel lanes, a couple turn lanes, no on-street parking, and also no bike facilities. And what we're proposing here is just to add, this one stripe on the right that would give us a bike lane along the curb going north, which is about a 4-foot bike lane, and then have a shoulder on the other side by narrowing the travel lane a little bit to a standard travel lane. It's currently very wide. And it's unfortunately not enough space to actually stripe it as a bike lane. So we're missing maybe a foot or 2, but it's still an improvement, both from a traffic calming standpoint and safety standpoint, but also if a pedestrian would want to walk there where there's no sidewalk, or a cyclist would like to ride closer to the curb, it increases the comfort level a little bit. And we're also looking at pedestrian safety improvements. So there are a couple of crosswalks along Telegraph in this stretch that we can upgrade the striping as part of this to a high visibility crosswalk, and also evaluate for other safety improvements. And that's something we would love to hear your input on as well. Is there a specific crosswalk that is in need of an additional treatment in the future when funding becomes available? And so we can add it to our list of future improvements. So this is the meeting where we can talk about any sort of questions or concerns you may have. So feel free to type your question in the chat or in the Q&A or ask your question verbally. But you can also submit your comments electronically on our website if you would rather, think about it or share, share this information with a neighbor that can submit comments via our website until July 22nd. In regards to Vdot's paving, as Huda mentioned, the 2021 paving schedule is done at this point. But they're starting to work on the 2022 schedule. So if you have any concerns, Vdot can always be reached through their portal. So here's the instructions on how to get in touch with us. So it's also our email address, activefairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or you can mail, send us a snail mail letter to the Fairfax County Department of Transportation with any comments. But again, the website is the best or easiest way to send us a quick email with comments. But if you would like to speak up now during the question comment segment, please type your question in the Q&A window or press *3 if you would like to raise your hand if you're on the phone, and we will unmute you. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of hands raised. We did get one comment in the chat that it was difficult to hear Huda. I know that was the case for me personally, but that's because my speaker was bad. If that's the case for other people as well, I guess we can remind everybody that this is recorded, so there is the option of going back and listening to that again later. All right, let's see, David has a hand up. I'm going to press unmute. Oh, nope, your hand went down. Okay. Larry, I'm going to press unmute, and you should get a message that you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I'm president of the Greater Wilton Woods Citizens Association, and I have a couple questions about crosswalks. Are you going to be adding any new crosswalks, or are you just going to be improving the crosswalks that currently exist?
So we're improving the crosswalks that currently exist that cross Telegraph, but I think we're maybe adding 1 or 2 crosswalks parallel to Telegraph Road. And if I can just stop sharing here, I can tell you which exact locations, because I cannot see my map right now.
Yeah, because I was contacted by one of our members and they would like to get a crosswalk at Florence because there's lots of houses up in the Florence neighborhood, and when the connector bus drops them off on the opposite side of Telegraph Road, they have to cross Telegraph Road in the evening to get to their homes, and it's a very dangerous road to cross.
Okay. So Florence, I can make that note. That is not a location where we currently have a crosswalk planned.
Correct.
I think there is no curb ramp on the other side, which is always an issue for the striping process. So where we can stripe crosswalks basically is where there is already a legal crosswalk, which means 2 ramps, one on each side. That would be an unmarked crosswalk, but it doesn't look like there is a ramp there. So we cannot stripe just a crosswalk without having a ramp there, and that would be a capital project. So we need to make that note of future ramp improvement that's needed. The roads where we are striping new crosswalks, I pulled it up here, and let me just scroll back up, are Paulinia Road and Pike Road. It's a little bit of an awkward intersection. So we are adding some high visibility crosswalks to show the pedestrians the preferred path of travel, so that they have, instead of just crossing the wide intersection, that they cross first Paulinia Road and then Pike Road.
Okay.
And then the crosswalks at the Parkway, both of those existing crosswalks will be upgraded to high visibility, which is the zebra kind of stripe, as we saw in the picture earlier. Let's see if there's another one. I think that may have been in it. Yeah, so those are the ones we can upgrade as part of this process. But we can take notes of any other crosswalk improvements and review those for installation in the future. And that would need to be further studied by Fairfax County to ensure that it meets warrants.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Margaret with a hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, actually, it's my husband, Daryl, who's going to ask the question.
Yes, we've lived in this area for about 20-something years now, and it seems like every few years there's a death between, Florence Lane and the S curve on Telegraph, and nothing's ever been done to improve that. And I was just wondering if there was going to be anything done to improve Telegraph Road itself, because adding bike lanes to that area would be kind of a useless proposition. We've had more people die in car accidents between those two areas than we have on bicycles.
Right, and there was a proposal to widen the road and basically reconstruct it, but that has been put on hold indefinitely. So I don't think that that's moving forward. So the county has built sidewalks, some segments of sidewalks that were missing along Telegraph, and there's still one outstanding segment between Pike Road and Wilton Road that was delayed because of the Stream Valley restoration in that area. And currently there's a feasibility study underway to see how the stream can be crossed either with a bridge or a culvert. So that is moving forward at the time. But we also doing a safety, like pedestrian safety planning effort that will hopefully allow us in the future to make changes to areas that that are known hotspots for crashes, particularly for active transportation, but also for vehicle or car crashes. So there is some movement on the county level, particularly to get some funding for that. So it's not that we don't care or don't want to change that. It's our funding is tied to has strings attached, and we don't have funding for safety improvements at this time. So we're hoping to get some funding specifically for safety improvements so we can make those updates more quickly when we know there's an issue.
I guess in the absence of them doing something about Telegraph Road, especially around the S-curve, where there isn't sufficient room for cars, much less adding a bike lane, I think you would be adding to these safety issues versus, creating a safer environment for all.
Yeah, so the bike lanes or the one bike lane is basically supposed to help with some of the speeding issues. Crashes
That's
often have a relationship to speeds, like people going too fast, which the speed limit may be too high on this road, or and often people go 10 miles over the speed limit, and the road's just not built for that speed, and that can lead to crashes. So that is also a question for Vdot, if there's a speed limit study that's potentially could be done, or what has led to the crashes. So that would need to be reviewed to see what exact changes would need to happen to make the road safer. I mean, an S-curve is already a little bit of a safety issue right there. But having higher speeds, maybe limited visibility around curves and driveways and all that coming together often can create safety issues on the road. So that's usually not an easy problem to solve. So it would need some
even if you're driving the speed limit, that is a dangerous place for cars.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ditches on both sides. So until Fairfax County decides to do something proactive about the ditches on both sides and widening that road, adding bike lanes is ridiculous.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure why that widening project was put on hold. I assume there was community pushback why that didn't happen. So that the county had that as a funded project and it was put on hold. So that would be a question for your supervisor's office to see what the history is there. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar.
Okay, thank you. All right, if you've already asked a question and you do not have any more, please remember to put your hand down so we know it's not something that we can do. Okay, so I see David with a hand up. Go ahead. We cannot hear you. Let's try again later. All right, how about Daniel?
You can hear me?
Yep.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Telegraph Road, where the sidewalk ends on the northbound lane, there's the bridge. And then you can't safely get across the road there to pick up the trail if you're a pedestrian and walk on. So that's a future project.
Mm-hmm.
I understand from your discussion. The next thing is, are you going to widen the road at the S curve to accommodate the bike lane?
No, so we are staying within the existing pavement width, so the road will not be widened as part of repaving. We are just narrowing the travel lanes, which are excessively wide currently, to a standard travel lane. And I saw someone ask a question in the Q&A as well. How wide is the standard travel lane? And it's 11 feet. So we currently have 14, 15 feet, which is a dangerously wide travel lane, which can lead to speeding.
So you don't think that that's going to increase the number of collisions which occur in that area with narrower lanes and higher speeds?
So it should help reduce the speeds and make the road safer. So it should help.
I'm concerned. There's been no thought to using Old Telegraph Road as the bike lane?
So that is a detour that people are free to use. It's actually the opposite side of the road. So for someone going, I guess, south, they could take Old Telegraph Road. But we only have a bike facility on the north side, going north.
All right. Thank you. Do we want to go through some of the Q&A questions at this point? I think there's a bit of a backlog there.
Sure.
The first one is, what future opportunities beyond this small section are Fcdot and Vdot examining to improve safety on Telegraph Road for people biking and walking?
So one thing we're working on, again, is that new sidewalk that's currently in design that should help fill a gap. We're also considering Telegraph Road for a regional trail as part of the regional trail network, which would free up some potential funding for an improvement of the existing paved trail segments, but also make it a comprehensive, wide, trail that is not piecemeal, but would serve the entire stretch. It's pretty important connector in that area. So that's more of a long-term vision for it, but it's something the county is working on formalizing. And that's part of the Capital Trail Network. If you may have heard about that, it's a regional effort to develop a paved trail network all around DC, including Montgomery County, and of course Fairfax County, Loudoun County, creating one connected network of shared use paths that would allow people in the region to move between population centers and attractions and parks safely. But that's more of a long-term vision. There definitely is some need for short-term safety improvements. There's currently, apart from the sidewalk that I mentioned, there's currently no funded immediate improvement, but additional improvements will be considered during the next transportation priority planning process. But that's a couple of years down the road, where new pieces of sidewalk and trail can be funded, as well as intersection improvements.
Great, thanks, Nicole. I think this next one is probably for Huda, if she's still on the line. Does Vdot consider feedback from residents for the repaving program?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we take requests, but we have to review them and basically go through the selection process and score the rating and if it fits within the priorities, depending on the condition and what rating is assigned to the road, we would definitely consider it. But however, just keep in mind the schedule for 2021 is already closed, and we're close to finishing the plans for 2022. So, but yeah, but in short, yes, we receive requests, we review them, and we provide feedback.
Thank you. Here's one for, I suppose, Nicole. A slight detour. We have one person saying that Fairfax County was at their street a few months ago and sawed up some areas of the pavement, and it's still unfinished. Who does one call to request that it be finished?
We would need to look into that specific project to see if it's a Vdot or a county, or potentially a water or utility work. So all of this should be done under Vdot permit. So the Vdot permit office would know who does the work and what's the timeline. So it's possible that they will come back. They're not finished yet. So it sounds like it's temporary patching that they would come back to finish.
There is a portal online where you can report a problem to Vdot. That may be the starting point, I guess.
Great.
Please speak more about plans for improved interconnected bicycle travel, both for this project and in general. And there's a comment about the Cinderbed Road bikeway nearby. And why is it going through the forest when we have so many streets that could be improved?
Sure, and that's a good question. So that bike trail was proposed or planned as part of the county bicycle master plan, which was developed over 5 years with lots of community feedback and then approved in 2014. So the county decided to prioritize it and fund it because it leads right to a metro station, and the county has worked hard to make access to the metro station more convenient and safe for active transportation users. And that's a very direct route that serves a industrial corridor, but also other residential areas down there. And it went through a public process, and it's federally funded. And those kind of funds are earmarked for the specific project and cannot be transferred to another road improvement. That is not part of the transportation priority plan. So the next round of funding will come through this next transportation priority planning process. I believe the next one is in 2026, depending on how our current projects go, even as late as 2030, and that's where we would have another chance of funding improvements that go along roads. It was just not a community priority at the time. So what is currently being funded is reflecting what the community preferred when it was first approved, I believe, in 2014 as well. Oh, and the other part of the question was what in general is the county doing to improve connectivity for bicycle facilities? And you may be aware that the county is updating the comprehensive plan for biking and walking. It's called the Active Fairfax Transportation Plan Project. There's a website on the county webpage if you're interested to learn more. We just had a big outreach engagement effort in the spring to learn more about preferences, but there will be more chances to get involved, particularly when it comes to network development, where should our trails go, where should bike lanes be, what type of bike lanes are preferred, on street, off street, where barriers to active transportation, pedestrian issues will be addressed. So that is still ongoing, and we're hoping to wrap up that plan update in the next 2 years. So keep an eye out for some of those announcements to get involved, because we really would love to hear from residents, particularly in your area, to hear your ideas of what your vision is for active transportation. And once we have that the comprehensive plan updated and adopted, it will be considered for funding as part of the next round of transportation funding as a transportation priority plan process.
Okay. How about a quick question, and then we'll go back to some hands raised. Nicole, what's the width of a standard travel lane?
So the standard travel lane is 11 feet. And that's a travel lane we use on Richmond Highway. So the new construction there is 11 feet. On a actual freeway, you will go up to 12 feet. But on a road like Telegraph, 11 feet would be standard. We go down to 10 feet potentially in some neighborhoods where there is no bus transit running on those lanes. So 11 feet is basically the golden width for accommodating all vehicles, even the really large ones, at the speed limits that are posted, without any sort of concerns that it could be, too narrow. But if you get wider to 13, 14, 15 feet, as we have done in the past, as engineers thinking that would help accommodate both bicyclists and drivers side by side, has led to unsafe speeding by drivers because the road is pretty much as wide as a racetrack and will be used as such. So narrowing it down to where it should be should help, keep the drivers down to the speed limit.
Thank you. I see Amanda has a hand raised.
Hi, I'm Amanda Wall. I'm a resident in Wilton Woods, and I wanted to second the suggestion about adding a crosswalk at Florence. I'm a little disappointed to hear that it doesn't sound like that's possible with this project. I walk with my children to Brown Academy, which is just down Telegraph Road from that intersection. And given what Telegraph Road traffic is at the same time that you are taking kids to and from school, it's a little dangerous to be crossing. There's also no school zone for that area, so drivers are going the speed limit, or like you said, usually 10 over. And I'm also a frequent, I run and walk very regularly in the area, and the sidewalk ends right there. So you have to cross Telegraph in order to keep accessing a sidewalk. It makes sense to put some kind of crosswalk there. I think that would really help with safety in the area.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for I neglected to introduce Lindsay Marford, who the third voice is that you're hearing. Lindsay is part of our active transportation team in Fairfax County and happens to be one of our crosswalk experts. So I'm sure she's taking notes, and we will look at what we can do either as part of the restriping, but as I said, not having a curb ramp. There's very, very limited abilities on both Fairfax County and Vdot side to add curb ramps at this time, but we will take a look and see. And if it's, if we don't have the funds, we can always add it to, the future list of crosswalks improvements we would like to do when funding becomes available. But the first important step is to know about it. So thank you for pointing it out.
Yes, I am taking notes. Thank you. And we do have a substantial running list of crosswalks that are desired. But yes, we can take a look. Okay, who else? 1 minute. I'm trying to cross-reference the Q&A with the hands raised. I think some people got tired of raising their hand and just typed in the Q&A. Okay, let's try David again, since it didn't work before. Nope.
Yeah, we saw that you unmuted yourself, but it's still, there's no sound.
Yep, and I tried remuting and unmuting to make sure, and we're not hearing anything. But I see that you did type something in the Q&A earlier, so if you do still have a question, please let us know in the Q&A. Oh, I think David actually put something in the chat asking, when will this project start? How long will it last? And what detour will be in place? With a request to please do not direct the detour to Old Telegraph Road. We recently had a horrible experience during the storm drain work.
So that's a question for Vdot.
So I am not quite sure I have the answer for this, but it's something I can get, I can review with our paving group and get back with you on more details.
All right, thank you. I don't know if either of you have the answer to this one. Do we know how many bikes use Telegraph each day?
So that would be included in a data set that Vdot has access to, but we would need to look that up. It's something that, and it's not a complete data set. Vdot has access to cell phone, like big data, I guess it's what they call it. It's Streetlight, a service that uses cell phone tracking to determine if someone is moving by foot, by bike, or within a vehicle. So there is some limited ability to see how many people use a road, but that's not something we have easy access to. That's something we would need to, that's data we have to purchase and analyze. We've done, some of that analysis at the countywide level, but not specifically on the Telegraph Road level, but it's certainly possible. It's also helpful to look at Strava data. So Strava is a company that some outdoor enthusiasts particularly use to track their walks or rides or runs, and it's shows not necessarily the total number of users, but it gives you a line, like a highlighted line, and the thicker the line, the more traffic from walkers or bikers you get on a corridor, and it's pretty telling, where the popular routes are. But again, it's a small segment of the population that uses those apps that provide that information. So we have not done official counts with the camera for a long time, for example, on Telegraph Road. So that would need to be specifically done to find out what the exact number of cycles is. But we have heard from users, of course, that are using the road and have asked for improvement.
Okay. We have a request to look at a specific section of Telegraph. It says there's this, I got this message, I think sent just to the host. There's a section of Telegraph Road near the intersection of Telegraph and Old Telegraph where the northbound sidewalk ends, and there's no safe connection to the trail that runs along the southbound side. There's a stream that goes under Telegraph near this intersection. Can this be looked at? I'm not sure what spot exactly that is.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a segment that is getting the sidewalk now, because that's around the Telegraph Road area. I'm trying to find it on my map here. So the missing sidewalk is being added, I believe, on the south side between Pike Road and Wilton Road, if I read our capital projects maps correctly. That's where a stream crossing is, and that's where the north end of Old Telegraph Road comes in.
Okay.
So you would not need to cross there. So that yeah, it looks like, looking at Google here,
okay.
that's the missing
the
segment that's coming. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I see it on the map now. Okay. All right, we have a couple more hands raised. Tina?
Hi. I had tried to send this question in through chat. I live in Wilton Woods along Telegraph Road, and I may be in the area that's being referred to as the S curve. I'm not quite sure. It's between Wilton Road and Old Telegraph. And there currently is a blacked top, I guess it's a bicycle / walking path that runs along from Wilton. It's on the right-hand side down to Old Telegraph, and it's in bad repair and has been for a number of years. We've lived here quite a long time, and it's never received any attention. I guess my question is this intended to be the continued bicycle path? Because I don't think there is any room to or space to add a bicycle path down on the roadway, which I think you may be suggesting that a sidewalk is going to be put down there, which I just don't know how you're going to fit that in.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the trail, so we would call it a trail on the north side. That yes, it looks like it definitely could use some resurfacing. We call those legacy trails. So they were meant to be a two-way bike facility when the trails plan that the county has was adopted in the 1970s, and that was way before modern trail standards. So seeing the trail tells me that this was a high priority for the community to have a bike facility along this road. And they put in this trail the best way they knew how to do in the 1970s or early 80s. But of course, it doesn't meet current needs anymore. It doesn't meet current bicycle facility standards. I mean, you can ride on it, but it's not particularly safe or comfortable. It's very narrow. It's hilly. Definitely in need of resurfacing and widening at some point. But that's what the intent was of that facility. So it was meant to be a two-way bicycle trail. So that will not be improved as part of the sidewalk project. The sidewalk will go in on the other side of the road and fill that gap. But at some point in the future, we will need to come in with a capital project and widen that trail to at least 8 feet. That's not something that's currently funded, but making this trail usable and safe for cyclists would require some construction and modernizing of this trail segment. But we can pass on the concerns about the current state to our maintenance folks at the stormwater management department. They're in charge of maintaining these type of trails, and I'm seeing them redo a trail in the Vienna area that looks exactly, or used to look exactly like this one. So there is some movement on rebuilding these trails and making them meet the needs of walkers and bikers a little bit better, but we have very little funding available for that. It's completely unrelated to this road paving funding. It's done by Fairfax County that gets a little bit of funding from local taxpayers to redo these trails and make them more usable and safe. But yeah, it's a legacy trail.
Yeah, widening it to 8 feet will completely wipe out the lower part of our driveway up on the hill. So I guess that's a conversation.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. Yeah, don't worry about it right now. There's no plan to do this anytime soon. That would be at least 10 to 15 years down the road if it's prioritized in the next round of funding. If it's not, it would be even further down the road. And there are ways of potentially, solving the trail issue and the drainage ditch issue at the same time. It could be curb abutted, for example, with the curb, which would improve the safety and some of the other concerns that we heard tonight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize we did not get to your question sooner. I do see it in the chat. There's a lot of questions coming in. So I don't see any other hands up right now except for David, who I'm sorry we can't hear you. So we'll go back to the Q&A. One moment. There's a comment for me for the crosswalk near or at Florence. Please also add for consideration an audible signal for individuals with vision impairments who live off of Florence. So that would be a signalized crosswalk at that point, right?
And I do believe there's a special process for that through
Yeah.
the county, I believe. Right, Lindsay, or is
Yeah.
that through Vdot? For
Well-
visually impaired, that they have there's a different set of funding. So I don't know who asked the question, but maybe we can make that connection and let them know what the process is.
Okay. Yeah, that would
Make that known.
we can follow up on that one. That makes it a different type of project for sure.
Yeah.
But that's a good concern. All right. There's a question in the chat and a question in the Q&A from two different people, both asking, what is the justification for bike lanes if we do not have bicycle quantity data? We don't have bike counts, I guess.
So the honest answer is that we actually started out with a shoulder to widen the to narrow the travel lane. So the whole point was to narrow the travel lanes in the first place. That's what the community feedback was we received, and what the supervisor office was interested in achieving. However, the concern was that people may start parking in something that looks like a parking lane, even though it's too narrow. That would create a safety issue. So turning it into a bike lane would both achieve the narrowing the travel lanes for safety reasons and make sure that nobody parks in it. So that's how the bike lane came to be. However, there are cyclists on the road, and we do hear from the bike community that's trying to, use that route to get to the metro or to Alexandria or just along, the neighborhood there. So that is the justification. I mean, it's a safety improvement for the most part.
Okay. How are emergency vehicles accommodated on the now narrowed lanes?
Just like they're on any other road. So emergency vehicles are fully accommodated on standard travel lanes. So we are not going substandard. It's a standard travel lane.
Thank you. And this was answered verbally. We have another question. What are the plans for the S-curve? But I think that has been addressed already through other responses. Oh, we have another person concurring. So we need a crosswalk at Florence.
Okay. We heard you loud and clear. We will take a look.
Yes. Yeah, that's at least 3 now.
But let me ask you while we have you, when is the best time of day, day of the week or season to do crosswalk counts? So sometimes you do have to do counts of pedestrians crossing to get a striped crosswalk. So is there, if you have any feedback for us to when most people would be crossing at this location, that would be helpful for us to narrow down our review of that crosswalk. You can type that in the Q&A if you want, or the chat.
We have a request for, I think this was addressed as well, it's for a crossing at Old Telegraph and Telegraph because of that path switching sides of the road. We addressed that with the new sidewalk.
Yeah, so I would say that so the timeline for that sidewalk, I'm not 100% sure, but considering that they just started design and feasibility studies, that will be coming within the next 2-3 years, I would say.
Okay, next question from the Q&A. If only one bike lane is to be added, how is two-way bike travel contemplated?
So the southbound direction has a shoulder, which is pretty much exactly as wide as a bike lane, but because there is no curb and gutter, it doesn't meet the engineering requirements to call it a bike lane. So even though it's the same amount of pavement someone can ride on, it doesn't meet the minimum requirements to actually legally sign it as a bike lane. So people can still ride in the shoulder where it's there, or share the lane if they feel more comfortable and safe doing that.
Thank you. Okay. The next question in the Q&A says, how did this particular project gain traction? I don't see a lot of cyclists in any bike lanes. When you say keep an eye out for opportunities to give feedback, where should we be keeping an eye out? I guess, what is the feedback mechanism?
So the feedback mechanism is this meeting. So we're taking notes and you know, try to learn from all of you about things we may not be aware of or any concerns. Then there is a 2-week feedback period where you can either send us an email or go to our website and submit a your feedback through a form that's on our paving page under the lead district. So you can do that or give us a call. So 2 weeks until July 22nd is when the comment period closes. And we will consider all feedback to make sure that we get the project right.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, Florence. There's a suggestion to count people at Florence during school drop-off or pickup or during peak bus hours. And also a suggestion to ask the Fairfax connector when people are using that bus stop.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, are there any plans on adding crosswalks, preferably with flashing high visibility lights, for bus stops on the southbound side of Telegraph?
Okay, can you read this again?
Okay. So are there any plans on adding crosswalks, preferably ones with flashing lights, for bus stops on the southbound side of Telegraph? Since the bus stops are paired, southbound and northbound side, I think it would sort of apply to both.
It's a crossing of Telegraph, right? So the commenter is on the north side and they're trying to get to the south side. That's what it sounds like. Because you wouldn't add the flashing parallel to Telegraph, but Telegraph is, I think, a fairly good candidate for rapid flashing beacons. I think that's a device you're referring to. It's pedestrian activated. It has really bright flashing lights when a pedestrian is crossing. It doesn't stop traffic, so a pedestrian still has to wait for a safe gap, but it's very visible when the pedestrian is crossing and traffic is coming. They can see from pretty far away that someone is using the crosswalk, and it really enhances safety. And get a lot of requests for those. So Lindsay can tell you, we will add it to the list of locations, the bus stops, and we really are focused on increasing access to transit, bus transit specifically, in the active Fairfax transportation plan, because we have issues with bus stop access all over. Because they often are along major roads or busy roads, of course, because that's where everyone wants to be and get to, and the buses run along to get to places. But it's definitely an issue. It can be quite uncomfortable or even unsafe to just take the bus, because you get dropped off or picked up on your side, but then you have to cross on the way back. Or on the way to your destination. So we will add it to the list of these locations where we are aware. They're not good devices for every single location. The bigger roads probably need what is called a HAWK, a pedestrian hybrid beacon that actually stops traffic. It's a pedestrian activated traffic light that turns red and stops traffic. That can only be installed mid-block. It can't be at an intersection, but many of our bus stops are semi-mid-block, and there's no signalized intersection close by. Those could be used But again, that's it's a specific funding that we need to be able to have access to in order to install these signals. But it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. I see Daniel with a hand up.
Yes, yes, a couple. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
It's
The
good.
first thing is, it's my understanding that the bike lane is going to end just about where, just past the S curve going north, right?
Yes.
The
About
bike-
the
bikes-
bike lane will be between the Parkway and Highland Drive, where
right.
the road is a little bit wider.
So then the bikes are going to be dealing with 2 lanes of traffic on Telegraph at rush hour, which is really a rough point for them. I don't ride the bike. The next thing is, how is it in Alexandria, which is not part of the state when it comes to roads? They've got a hawk light and a crosswalk where there's only like one road intersecting Potomac Avenue, for example. How is it they can do that in Alexandria, but we can't do it at the state? For example, if you look at you know where Potomac Avenue is in Alexandria? There's a park. And I own a condominium over there and called the city and I said, hey, people cannot get safely across the road. And then what the city did was they put in a crosswalk and then they put a hawk light in so that the pedestrians could activate the light. If the desire of the county is to get more people to use buses, I think they need to look at it and say, hey, do we have enough density here to put in something or to rethink our policy of no crosswalk where we don't have 2 intersections? You know, where you need right now you're telling me that you have to have a 4-way intersection for a crosswalk. We cannot have one at Full Armor's Lane, but for the state guideline, because there's no road on the other side of Florence Lane.
Sorry, let me clarify. So everywhere there's an intersection, there are crosswalks legally. So every leg of an intersection legally is a crosswalk. However, we can only stripe a crosswalk when there is a curb ramp, and that's what's missing. So the Florence doesn't have a curb ramp on the other side, but that's something that can be added. Yes. And with a capital project, curb ramps are quite expensive, surprisingly. I'm not sure what our latest cost is, but they're about $15,000, I think, for at least the county to put them in. Slightly cheaper for Vdot, maybe. But we don't have any disposable funding because we fund our projects differently. So as I mentioned before, we have this transportation priorities plan where we invested, I think through a bond, about $285 million into pedestrian infrastructure. It was hundreds of projects that were funded at the same time, and those are the projects we're currently constructing all over the county. So we do it that way, and then every 6 years we go through the same process again, usually to select new projects. And it would be there where we would have, for example, a package for crosswalk improvements and hawks along certain corridors, and we could fund it all together. And the way other jurisdictions fund their infrastructure improvements is more piecemeal. So maybe they have $3 million a year available, and then they in that year they spend $3 million on whatever they feel is a priority at the time. So it's just a different way of funding it. And Alexandria is a lot smaller too, so their needs are a little bit more compact. So we have we calculated that we have about a $10 billion need for pedestrian infrastructure in Fairfax County. So it's huge. There are problems all over. Most of the county was developed at the era where everything was built for cars and not for pedestrians. So we have a huge need to retrofit, and retrofitting is very expensive. And we don't own our roads, so all roads are Vdots. So we have to work with Vdot on getting a permit for our projects, which makes them slightly more expensive, but also it takes longer time. But again, it will probably take a good amount of time to really build out the network that we would like to have in Fairfax County. And as the commenter earlier was mentioning, there are properties in the way, there are properties affected that are very close to the very narrow roads, and there may not be space for a good bicycle or pedestrian facility right now, and it would have a property impacts. And sometimes that's not a problem, it's desired by the community, and sometimes it's not desired by the community. So there are different challenges in different communities.
I have one last question. Last year, I called the water department and said, hey, it looks like there's some kind of leak or something wrong with Route 1 over where the pedestrian was later, where there was later a head-on crash, and the road was entirely covered with water. And I called the water folks and I said, hey, looks like there's a problem there. If the Fairfax County Water Department goes out and inspects something and they say, hey, it's not a leak in the water pipe, it's something else, do they inform the state, with the local state highway folks? Because that was where the accident occurred, where a woman was coming up the road and her car hit the ice and her son was killed. So I'm wondering if there's a flow through of saying, when somebody calls in and says, there's a safety issue here involving, it looks like running water, that the local state office isn't notified. So then they can say, hey, there's a problem here, we've got to fix it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that would be Vdot. So let Huda answer that question.
Yeah, so I assume we do have a system for basically reporting problems like safety problems and addressing them. Typically, a ticket with a number get created, and then our maintenance staff will get to it, review it, and respond back. However, for something urgent like this, I assume the urgency will need to be stated in the request. So we're a large organization and we receive a lot of requests, but I'm sure if it got to the right hands, they would have acted on it quickly.
Yeah, I just make sure that there wasn't breakdown there, because the road was wet from curb to curb. And I said, hey, this is a dangerous area here. And I figured that, I don't know if it's the local water main leak or what, but I'm wondering if there's a process so that they, when the county sends out somebody looks at the water thing and said, hey, it's not our problem. There's something wrong with the road surface here. We need to let the state know. So then we as concerned citizens don't have to call back and say, was it a water problem at the county level, or was it at the state level? And in this case, about a month later, it was freezing conditions, and a woman was driving her son up, and there was a head-on collision, and their son was killed. And I'm wondering if there's a breakdown there. That's all.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate, but I understand there was a detailed investigation on this issue. So hopefully, yeah, any loops in this process are being closed, but I'll definitely report back and just check on what system we have in place, and whether if it's got updated. But as you can imagine, the investigation would have started with the water authority, and then I don't know if they made efforts to contact the state with their conclusions and all of that, but there was a thorough investigation, unfortunately, after the accident. And but yeah, I will definitely relay your concerns to our appropriate parties at the department. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you. We have a question in the chat, a request, I suppose. People are parking along the northbound Telegraph Road lane. Will you put no parking signs along the section of road that abuts the bike lane? I'm not clear if that's parking along the shoulder or parking like in the travel lane somehow.
Yeah, that would be helpful to clarify. So we saw that there may be some parking in the gravel shoulder, but it would be helpful to know if there's any parking on the street anywhere and where exactly that would be. Because it's not unless there's a parking lane already, the road is a bit narrow to legally park, but it would be helpful to know where exactly the parking is occurring so we can take a look at that. If you could provide that information in the chat, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And then another question, I'm not sure if this has been addressed already. Will there be a crosswalk to get from the end of the northbound sidewalk along Telegraph at the intersection of Old Telegraph so that pedestrians can safely cross to the trail on the other side of the road? But that may have been addressed by the upcoming projects to add the sidewalk.
Correct. So hopefully there won't be a need to cross anymore at that location, with the sidewalk continuing across the gap.
There's another comment about when to potentially count pedestrians. Concur on crosswalk crossing with Fairfax connector, especially in the afternoon, evening after 5:30 p.m. Thank you. Okay. To clarify, if somebody wrote that the gravel shoulder is southbound, and between the Parkway and Old Telegraph, cars are parking on the northbound side of the road. And someone else saying that yes, folks are parking along the street in the northbound lane of Telegraph. It's the same
Okay,
area
thank
where
you.
the bike lane is proposed.
Yes, that's really good information to have, that people are actually parking there. So that is something we need to look at.
Yep.
Thank you for making us aware.
Okay. If the lanes in the S-curve section of Telegraph are narrowed, is there enough maneuvering room for buses and other commercial trucks? I don't want them to move into my lane while they're trying to get through that section.
So can you repeat the question? I was just noting down the
Yeah.
parking location.
Sure. If the lanes in the S-curve section of Telegraph are narrowed, is there enough maneuvering room for buses and other commercial trucks so that they can stay in their lane?
Yes, there should be. So 11 feet should be enough for trucks and buses to stay in their lane. And a 10-foot lane would probably not be enough, but 11 feet should be enough to stay in the lane.
Okay.
Because there's no parking. So sometimes if you see a bus drifting across the lane in an 11-foot lane, there's likely parking as well. And buses always try to stay 3 feet away from the parking. That's why I was concerned to hear people actually park on Telegraph, because it's not wide enough. So that's where the buses have to cross the line. So that's a safety issue we need to look into, to make sure that the road is wide enough to actually accommodate that parking safely without having a head-on issue.
I think this next one may be a repeat. How will we know when the project will begin and where the detour will be? I think that was a question for Huda, right?
Yes, that is correct. So I don't really have the schedule available with me. I'm going to have to get back with the paving team, and I will pass on a response to that.
Great. And the follow-up question there, also, when will the crossing of Telegraph from Old Telegraph be completed? Have we discussed a crossing from Old Telegraph?
I think this may be referring to the sidewalk project, and it doesn't have a
Okay.
schedule online yet. So I think they just started working on this project again. So we need to look that up. But all the county projects, the capital projects are on our website. And maybe I can drop the link in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone can actually see the chat. Yeah, I
Yes,
think only the panelists can see.
We can send a chat to everyone.
Okay, all right, let me find the link, and then you can click on that information of the project. And currently it says on hold, but I've been told today that it's not actually on hold anymore. It's moving forward. So that will soon have more information on a timeline. Within the next month, they should know what the timeline of the construction is.
Hi, this is Huda. I just wanted to add one additional comment regarding the request for the schedule and the detour. So typically the paving contractor will post signs and many times they will even hang it on doors to announce the project schedule, like within 2 weeks time frame or something like that. And so there will be more details posted on these signs regarding parking and the schedules and any potential detours. So that's information. They make every effort to make sure all the residents are aware of what's coming. But beside that, I'll still check the schedule and pass on what I find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just posted a link into the chat. If everyone can see that, it's a interactive map that the county maintains that shows all capital projects that are currently funded. And you can see the different sidewalk projects along Telegraph Road if you zoom in onto that area. And if you click on the different segments, it tells you if it's constructed or if it's on hold or what the status is, and a little bit more information about the project number. To kind of follow along on where they are. So at some point it will say, it will go from on hold to initiated and then in design, and then there will be a right-of-way phase where someone expressed a concern that there's not much room. So there is probably a right-of-way phase, likely some. I'm not familiar with the project, but it looks like there may be some right-of-way potentially needed to finish the crosswalk there. So that may take a while, but it will. There will be a project website that you can go to and learn more about who the project manager is. If you have questions, there will be public meetings about it. So if you're interested in that particular segment, and it sounds like a few of you are walking along that area and may want to stay involved. It's always helpful to, if you want to hear announcements and learn about these public meetings, to follow Fairfax County on Facebook, Fairfax County Department of Transportation. All public meetings are announced on the Facebook page, and also in your supervisor less newsletter. They announce meetings there, but the county's Facebook page is the most reliable source for all public meetings related to transportation.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, we have a comment that people are also parking on the southbound part of Telegraph Road. So I guess that's something we need to look into.
Yeah, and if that would be helpful also to know where exactly that parking is. So if we will look into it and see if parking is even legal there, and if it will remain legal. And we usually don't want to remove any parking that's currently being utilized unless there's a safety issue. So if it's safe to park there, we'll try to maintain it. If it's unsafe, it would probably need to be signed as no parking, or the bike lane. At least northbound, the bike lane would automatically make it no parking. On the southbound, the shoulder would still potentially allow parking. But we need to know where exactly that parking is.
Okay. Is the plan to move the guardrail on the S curve to put in the sidewalk, or will the sidewalk abut the current guardrail?
I'm not sure if they have made it to that part of the project yet. They're in the beginning stages of scoping the best, way of, designing the sidewalk on the stretch. So that's TBD. But again, there will be public meetings and information on the website that will talk about the design that is proposed. So what they're currently working on is the best way to cross the stream. So they're looking at either a bridge or a culvert, which is, you know, this a concrete tunnel under a sidewalk or road.
Thank you. Okay, we once again have two different people saying the same thing, which is fantastic. In response to the question about where are people parking on the southbound side, there's two different people saying that parking on Southbound Telegraph is at the construction staging area for the creek restoration project.
So that's interesting. So do you think that the current parking on both northbound and southbound could potentially be construction related and not actually, you know, residential parking? That would be helpful to know, because if it's temporary, the concern is not as much as than homeowners parking in front of their residence.
We have a comment that during heavy rain, the S-curve area fills with water across both lanes, and that the drainage should be tended to. This person says, I would want to see that tended to before any bike lane is added, as it is hazardous currently.
So that will be passed on to Vdot as
Okay.
well.
So
Could you repeat the question on the location again, please?
oh, on this last question.
Yes, about the drainage.
So during heavy rain times, the S-curve area fills with water across both lanes. So the S-curve on Telegraph.
Okay. All right. And I'm not very familiar with that location. Do you happen to have an intersection or something to refer to it, or?
Where the driveway is located at 6016
Walton
Telegraph.
Road. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll report that to our maintenance crews and see what they can do about it.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Several people. Oh, there's a follow-up to that saying that the water overflows the drainage infrastructure in the S-curve and freezes during the winter. And then some follow-up for Nicole on the construction staging area. We have several people commenting that the construction is actually done now, and there are cars parked overnight, suggesting that it may be resident parking, residents or guests.
Okay, thank you.
And some more comments saying all of those things.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful information. On the drainage issue, obviously that's something that needs to be addressed immediately. But in the long term, that pedestrian walkway that is being built on the south side will include, you know, state-of-the-art drainage infrastructure that will definitely remedy the long-term drainage issues. I mean, nowadays it's an old road currently, and the infrastructure on the north side is also old. So it has a different, it doesn't meet, it may not meet current drainage requirements, but any new project that's going in will need to remedy that long term. So hopefully this can be addressed in the short term, because that seems to be a real safety issue, but then the long term, it should be fixed through the walkway improvement.
Okay, there's a couple of hands up. I don't know if they remain up from before or if we have new questions. I guess the first one is Tina.
I think my question concerned the S curve and the guardrail, so you've already responded to that. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, sorry about that. Your question was in the Q&A, and there was a backlog.
Yeah, you can
We
take
have a
your
lot.
hand down by pressing the raise hand button again. So that will disable it. I'm sorry we didn't mention that before.
Yeah, and then the only other hand up right now is Daniel. And again, I don't know if that's a new question.
I'm done with my questions.
Okay, thank you.
I thought it lowered after you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, if that's all, then I believe we have nothing. We have no hands up. We have no Q&A questions right now. We have one comment in the chat that the parking on the south side of Telegraph does not obstruct traffic, and the area is wide enough that the parked cars would also not impact cyclists in the southbound lane.
Okay, yeah, I think we're familiar with that parking because it's off street. It's the on-street parking that we need to definitely need to take another look at to see if it can legally be maintained and how we would design that. So thank you again for that information. And since we have no additional questions and it's past time, thank you for sticking around that long, and thank you for all your questions and very helpful information that you were able to provide. We will take that back and discuss internally with Vdot on how to proceed with some of these design issues. So thanks again. And if you can think of anything else, again, please reach out to us via our website, comment form, or our email address is activefairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or you can use any other Fcdot email address that you can find on our website. It will all get back to me to distribute to the right person. If you have anything else you would like to share. All right, thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.